I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, I'm delighted to introduce you to a very talented author. His name is Kenneth David Musser, and he has written a very powerful book. It is called Grandfather's Enduring Love. In the book, the author takes a deep dive into the compelling true story of a Kansas family's resilience over 4 generations amidst a backdrop of tragedies, including the horrifying death of the matriarch on New Year's Day of 1927. The narrative explores the themes of enduring love, mental illness, and the power of faith in overcoming life's darkest moments. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the folks at Mainspring Books for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support writers like him by subscribing to our channel. Ken, great to have you on our show today.
It's a privilege being with you, Logan. Thank you so much.
This is quite a story. Is this your family's story that you write about?
This is my family story. That's why it's very personal. Uh, it's it's my grandfather, who was the best friend I ever had on this earth. He gave me the love that I never got at home.
Mm.
And on New Year's Day, 1927, his wife, my blood grandmother, burned to death.
Mm.
She was making breakfast for her 3 little girls. The oldest 2 girls that Eve were over at aunt and uncle's.
Yeah.
But at 5 o'clock that morning, my grandfather got a call from a neighbor whose cattle had gotten out. So my grandpa, when this happened, wasn't there.
Mm.
That left the oldest witness, Faith, was only 5 years old, Eunice 3 years old, and Mary Lou 3 months old were upstairs. And
Amazing.
this 5-year-old little girl, Faith, she would grow up, Logan, to be my mother.
Wow.
And she lived a life of psychiatric problems,
Mm.
mental issues, depression, anxiety. And it's strange. Over the next 2 years, in 1928, my grandpa's brother, who was 12 years his senior, had his limbs tore off by a pulley belt in a thrashing machine. A
Unbelievable.
year later, 12 days before my grandfather was supposed to have remarried to a Carrie Deemy from Dallas Center, Iowa, a cyclone leveled their entire farm. My grandpa had to call up Carrie, and he didn't know how she was going to take this. When he told her what happened, what she said, here are her words: a tent or a cottage. Why should I care? She was willing to leave her great home in Iowa to come and live out of a built temporary chicken house for 3 or 4 weeks.
Mm.
And she was a wonderful step grandmother. And this little Faith grew up. My grandfather had 5 children from my blood grandmother who burned to death. He
Mhm.
also had 5 children from my step grandmother, Carrie.
Mm.
And my grandpa called that a complete family.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, he had 5 girls first, and then he got his 2 boys, 2 girls, and then a boy. And
Amazing.
it was like in March about 1952, when I was not quite 8 years old. We were in our home in Kansas, and something happened that is that affected me for the rest of my life. My mother slapped my daddy in the face
Mm.
and said some bad words. Because as time goes on, I really didn't know how this was going to affect me. I mean, I was sent about that same time. My mother, for no reason at all, Logan, sent me to an outside cellar, dark, all by myself. There I would spend 2 or 3 hours at a time, all alone.
Mm.
This went on from the ages of 8 to 10. Now, I was reading in my memoir book. I have, like, psychologists say that the most important ages that the abuse could start and really hurt you are ages 8 to 10. And 8 to 10 is the same age that I was during
Mm.
those 2 years. And I always loved to play basketball.
Mm.
And when on my Christmas, when I was 7, my parents got me a basketball. And I always dreamed of being a college great basketball player.
Mm.
But psychologists have discovered for the last number of years that a young child needs to have time with other children so
Mm.
he can, grow up with that. And here I was alone without sunshine. And um, yeah, so this went on from the ages of 8 to 10. When I was when I was 10 years old, we moved to Abilene, Kansas. Now, Abilene is the hometown of our 34th president of the United States, Dwight David Eisenhower.
Mm.
And my daddy, David Musser, was the pastor of the same church that Ike went to when he was a boy growing
Wow.
up. And I have in my book, people really like this, I think. I have some lifelines, Logan, that helps me through this time in the spending all these hours in the basement. The
Mm.
number one was my grandfather's farm. That's where I got the unconditional love.
Mm.
My grandfather, Logan, had a chance. Remember, I told you the youngest daughter was only 3 months old when her mother burned to death.
Mm.
My grandpa had a chance. A very rich young couple wanted to pay him lots of money to adopt 3-year-old Mary Lou.
Mm.
My grandpa thought of it for just a little bit. Things were bad. He had lost his wife, but my grandfather showed his unconditional love. He kept Mary Lou in the family.
Mm.
And in the summer times, my parents would go to Iowa to hold Bible school meetings. My brother was 4 years younger. He was never abused like I was. But those 4 weeks each summer, Logan, I would go out to Grandpa's farm for the whole month.
Mm.
And that's where I got the love that I never received at home. I
Amazing.
don't ever remember my parents giving me a hug, never a I love you. And in my book, you'll find out how I've changed so much. It took this writing of my book to realize that I was abused.
Yeah.
All of these years growing up, I was being torn inside
Yeah.
when I saw my mother slapping my daddy on the face, saying the words NH, 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 NH. Those are the initials for my daddy's father, Noah Harrison.
Mm.
My mother had something awful in for about my, that tore me apart. My second lifeline was the world of sports.
Mm.
From the age of 8, you will find in my book, as far as I know, I've never missed one sporting event on the radio. It all starts with the 1955 Kentucky Derby. I, when I was 12 years old, I stopped at a Sears and Roebuck store. I waved, and the lady who was who was the wife of my barber,
Mm.
waved to me. there was a basketball game going on between Illinois and Ohio State. She let me come in. Logan, I spent an hour and a half watching that game. How many kids my age would be so content in doing that?
Mm.
All through my book, I have instances of how sports helps me persevere. And in in my research, condi- uh, conditional love is without condition. I mean, enduring love is without conditions.
Mhm.
You love no matter what,
Yeah.
just like my grandfather did when he lost his wife Anna Zelma. The third lifeline for me, Logan, was the Abilene, Kansas Public Library.
Mm.
That was my home away from home
Yeah.
during a school year. I can honestly tell you from 1955, when I was 10, to 1962 when I graduated, the library was my home away from home. I would devour sports papers, newspapers. The first book I ever read was about my favorite baseball player of all time, Lou Gehrig, who was born on June 19th, 1903, in Manhattan, New York. And he's the one that ALS is known for,
Yes.
Lou Gehrig. And that's the first book I ever checked out of the Abilene Library, Lou Gehrig.
Amazing.
And when I would go out, and then there was a foyer right between the adult and the children's library,
Yeah.
and there would be free magazines there. I don't think anybody else ever picked them up. Life magazines, Look magazines, National Geographic magazines, and I can name you three books that had pictures of. There was a little boy who was kidnapped in 1953 in Kansas City, Bobby Lee Greenleaf. A lady came in to his Catholic school one day, said something had happened to his parents. He was only 6. He went out. An hour later, he was dead.
Mm.
They were on the front page. Another one's Julius, the Rosenbergs,
Right.
for espionage. That was the front page. Queen Elizabeth, a number of times on the front page. And I would read that same evening, I would read the Salina Journal, that's 20 miles from Abilene. I would read the Topeka Daily Capital, the Kansas City Star, and our home newspaper, the Abilene Reflector Chronicle.
Amazing.
And
Amazing.
out of all my classmates, Logan, I can honestly say there were 150 that I graduated with in 1962 from Abilene High School. Honestly, I only remember, and I have a tremendous memory. You'll find out in the book how God has blessed me with a memory.
Wonderful.
My my mother and I share one thing. Even though she was so abusive to me, there's what's called in the brain the hippocampus,
Hmm.
which is the memorization and the emotion. My I inherited my mother's depression and anxiety. And I tell you one instance. When I was around 30 years old, I was working as a salesman for a snack company. I drove the truck. My my boss was going to go with me that morning. Whenever I was with an older man or supervisor, I couldn't bear it. And it took me to write my book. I always thought that my daddy was the one that was being abused, but there was the double whammy.
Mm.
It took me 60 years later when I wrote my book to find out that I was also emotionally abused.
It's an amazing story, Ken. And I think a lot of people have similar revelations in that all they knew was abuse. Getting locked in the basement or getting slapped across the face or witnessing domestic violence in the home. That's all they knew. That was their normal. They don't categorize it as abuse. But years later, you did figure out what happened. You did piece together the pieces of the puzzle, and it's made you a better person for it. This book is extraordinary. It's amazing the impact that your grandmother's death had on the family. Even more impressive is the impact of your grandfather's love, which of course is the name of the book, Grandfather's Enduring Love by Ken David Musser. It's an amazing story. It's a real life story. It's a story that will inspire you. We all have challenges in this life. Ken has overcome his. You can overcome yours. You'll learn a lot from this story, and you'll just be mesmerized by it. Ken, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
It was awesome being with you. Thank you so much, Logan. I appreciate it.
I appreciate your time. It was an awesome experience for me as well. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.